There's two topics you can pick from. I don't think we're going to get a chance to do this.
It's up to you. I mean,
They're kind of very similar.
well, you can go to polygamy because I haven't done anything really.
Okay.
I could say the jinn I've talked about.
There's a lot.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the Young Smirks podcast. Today I'm here with Sheikh Dr. Bilal Phillips. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, it's a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. Today I wanted to speak about one of your books. This is a somewhat controversial topic of the day, but I think it's also very needed. And I think it's interesting because you actually wrote a book with your wife about polygamy in Islam. So I wanted to I was wondering what inspired you to write such a book.
Well, I wrote it in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right. I wrote it in the 80s when I married a second wife, right? And needed to have guidelines, and I couldn't find any book which spoke about it specifically. There were no books available at all, on the topic. So, and I knew of many of my friends who had accepted Islam, through the 70s and that in the States and UK, who had more than one wife. But that wasn't the issues of what could arise if you had a second wife didn't come to my mind because I didn't have a second wife.
Yes.
So when I had a second wife, now, necessity is the mother of invention. I had to get something together. I had to prepare, a manual that I needed to follow. So I studied a book by Ibn Qudama, his classic book on fiqh, which covers in depth, basically, all of the major areas of fiqh. It's called Al-Mughni, right? Al-Mughni. And what I did was I translated the material which I was studying, and my wife wrote it out between the two of us. What I wrote, she edited, and she edited what I translated, and so it's a combination of both. And we also went looking specifically for certain topics that came to her mind, and also, my first wife also, there are issues that she had, so I went searching, because I could do the searching, because I had the Arabic, I had fiqh background, etc. And they had English language. Actually, my second wife was an English teacher. She was a professor in university in Taif. So this was the genesis of the book, the foundation, identifying the laws and rules. Of course, I sat also and talked with scholars. Those that were available in Riyadh at the time. If things weren't clear, I would go to them and get their clarifications. So that's the process.
Do you think that polygamy is more common these days amongst the Muslims? Do you think Muslims are more open to having more than one wife?
I can't speak about Muslims around the whole world. To say, is it a rising trend? I think there's places where it's a norm. You know, in Nigeria, for example, you know,
Yes.
it's common, it's normal. Nobody bats an eye, you know, if somebody takes a second wife or a third wife, whatever, it's just the norm. So in some parts of the world, you know, it's quite normal.
Yeah.
In other parts of the world, that depending on the level of colonization by the colonial powers, where they put rules which, you know, made it difficult or whatever, they, you know, discouraged it, they spoke against it or whatever. So this is what determines what level that the people respond or are engaged in it.
Yeah.
You know, some
know-
places it's just so rare. Nobody does it. You know,
Yes.
you think to do it. This is how you can't, and you know, this is.
Yeah. You know what's quite interesting? You know, it's more popular than people think amongst non-Muslim Westerners.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
my grandfather had two wives. Obviously, one was unofficial, but he had two families, literally half a mile down the road from each other.
Wow.
And you know, it was known amongst the community. You know, and it's quite common. There were people, you know, back 50 years ago in the UK. You know, a man having two families. You know, and unofficially, of course, because you can only register one marriage in the UK legally. But you know, it's more common than people think.
But no, what I used to
Yeah.
when I used to look at this, I said I would say that you know, people, the girlfriends were common law wives. I mean, people were practicing it without rules.
Yes.
That's the point.
Yes.
You know, so it is much more common in the West. It's much more practiced in the West than in the East.
Yes.
You know, by default.
Yes.
But but it's on paper, it's illegal,
Yes.
right? And that is what women don't understand. That's to the advantage of men, because if it's illegal, it means they really have no claim.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's legal, then there are rules involved and rights and things have to be identified.
Yes.
So it's what Islam is making legal what people are already practicing. It's not something new in the history of the world.
Yeah. Sheikh, maybe you can give us some general kind of pointers of what Islam kind of teaches in terms of polygamy. How does it look from both sides? You know, what are some of the key principles and laws and rules that Islam has within marriage and more specifically like a polygamous marriage? For somebody who doesn't know anything about polygamy or certainly the Islamic kind of understanding of it, can you give us an overall look at what does the Islamic concept look like?
It's marriage. It's not something outside of marriage. See, this is the West looks at it as something outside of marriage. That the second family that the man has is illegitimate. So the marriage is the marriage to the first wife. Whereas in Islam, you know, Allah made it clearly permissible in the Quran. In fact, He recommended, based on the fact that when He made it permissible, He began by saying, you know, فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى. You know, marry of the women of your choice that are good seeming to you, beginning with 2, 3, or 4, but if you cannot, then marry only 1. So this is what a number of the scholars pointed out, that there's a recommendation for polygamy.
Yes.
And the Prophet ﷺ encouraged marriage and having, you know, a lot of children, that the ummah, you know, that would grow and be large. As he said, he would be proud, you know, of our numbers on the Day of Judgment.
Yeah.
So marriage in Islam is marriage, whether you marry 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, but the key is marriage.
That's an important point, because a lot of people, they look at, like you say, polygamy, they're thinking, oh, it's like a bit someone who's a secret or a bit on the side sort of thing. But no, in Islam, there's only relationships in the constraints of marriage, which involves things like your father being involved, the mahar, the community knowing about it and things like that. So both, they are both done within marriage, subhanAllah. Yeah. And then what are some of the other principles and lessons that Islam teaches regarding polygamy?
Well, justice, equality, just as a man or woman and their children, one has to be just with the children. You don't give one and give the other, that there should be justice in what you provide for them. Similarly, between wives, the man is required to be just. You don't just give only to one wife and not give to the other, because you like this wife, you don't like the other wife as much, so you give so much more to this wife and so much little less to the other. It is the reality that justice has to be, maintained.
Yes.
But of course, it is within what is logical and reasonable.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying, for example, you have 2 wives, one is slim and one is plump, right? Now, if you give to the slim wife, a yard of cloth, which will cover her fine, but you give to the plump wife the same yard of cloth, which won't cover her fine. Yeah, it is just in the same, you've given both of them the same. But in the case of the plump wife, it's not enough.
Yes.
So you have to give her more.
Yeah.
So the justice, is tempered by the need,
Yes.
the requirements that it's involved. Now, so same thing with the place of living. You give one wife a house with 2 bedrooms, and she has kids, and the other wife you give 1 bedroom because she doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
She has no kids. So no, but if she gets kids, then yes, now you have to provide a 2nd bedroom for her.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the difference between justice and equality, really. Because if you used to be equal,
it can become
doesn't make
unjust.
Unjust.
In some circumstances.
Subhanallah. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. What are some of the benefits that in this day and age is? Well, I mean, you've already told us you have more than one wife, but the question is, in this day and age, many people ask, is polygamy relevant in this day and age? Is it relevant? Is it needed? And what type of benefits come from it in this day and age? Or is it something that was just for the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him?
Well, definitely it wasn't just for the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the prophets before had more than one wife. The Sahaba who were around him in his time had more than one wife. After he passed, had more than one wife. Their students had. So it's been a part of Islamic tradition all along. So it's not limited to any particular period of time. Reality, as we see globally, there are more women in the world than men. Due to a variety of different factors, whether it's men dying in the wars, mostly men killing men, or it's even at birth, the chance of male children dying at birth, in the birthing process, is greater than that of women. So there are a number of factors you know, even in the crimes, you know, killing, and it's usually men murdering other men. You know, yes, there's some men murdering women and some women murdering men, but if you look at the big numbers, it's usually men killing other men. You know, so all of these factors are there which limit the number of men.
Or women killing men for being polygamous.
We don't have too much of that, really, but it does. I mean, it does happen.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So subhanallah, it's an important topic because within Islam it is a part of being, you know, it is a part of Islam. Some people ask the question: does a man have to seek permission from his first wife in order to get married?
no, he doesn't. Some countries have made that a law, where they must do that. The idea of seeking permission when Allah has already given permission is, of course, unreasonable. You know, if Allah has made this halal, then nobody can make it haram. So, seeking permission of the first wife, but informing the first wife, it's good. Where the circumstance allows it. If a husband took a second wife in another country, for example, it's permissible for him to do so, and it be known in that second wife's country, but not known in the first wife's country. It's possible, you know. If the first wife, for example, the husband knows that the first wife is going to explode and leave, and all these other things could happen, you know, and he wants to avoid that, to be able to tell her gradually, you know, then he may not inform her immediately at the time that he marries the second wife.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, there are factors which will cover and determine, as long as it's not deception.
Yeah.
You know, that one lives, you know, the secret life. As you said, it's a secret wife. Nobody else knows about it but the husband.
Sheikh, there's always, you know, men tend to speak about polygamy in terms of its permissibility, you know, but I wanted to ask you about some of the mistakes which both men and women make in terms of polygamy. You know, what are some of the points of advice maybe you can advise the Muslims on, maybe some of the ways they do polygamy where you think there might be better ways to do it, or points of advice that come to mind?
I would say that probably the biggest issue is communication and justice, maintaining fairness. You know, my advice to wives is to avoid comparing oneself to the other wife, you know, because yes, the husband may do some things and it might appear that one is favoring the other, or, you know, over oneself, but it's better to be, how would we say, it's better to be patient and get to the bottom of it, understand it, and then, of course, communicate the issue to the husband, you know, not to keep it bottled up inside of herself and, you know, then explode at some time because of other factors. You know, the communication should be there. Importance of being able to communicate and be kind.
Yeah.
You know, all the things that are required for a good marriage in terms of how one speaks to the other, how one deals with the other.
Yeah.
You know, all of these principles should extend to both wives. Not that when one marries a second wife, then all of the things are given to the second wife because she's a new wife, you know, and then the first wife is neglected, you know, or, you know, the other way around. Later on, if there are problems arising with the second wife, then, you know, one ignores or neglects the second wife and leans towards the first wife. It's really just trying to find the balance between both,
Yeah.
and be just, fair, and kind, gentle, you know.
Yeah. Sheikh, another thing which, because again, polygamy is always kind of spoken about from a man's perspective, usually, in the sense that it's because the man is allowed another wife, that it's kind of his thing. Whereas I think women also kind of have a choice of thinking about polygamy in terms of, you know, marrying somebody who's already married. You know, but there's many Muslim women who are not married. You know, they're getting older, they have desires, they want children, they want a family, but maybe they've made a mistake. They became a career woman. All of a sudden they get to 35, 30, they've realised I've been cheated by the system. You know, they made me become a career woman, and I nearly forgot about family. You know, and then they start to think, oh, well, you know, it's time to have a family. And I think one mistake that a lot of women make is not considering it for themselves as well. It's not just about the man thinking that if he wants another wife, but also for women to actually consider being a second wife or a third wife or a fourth wife and having the benefits of family, you know, growing old with somebody, you know, thinking about having children to support you when you get older, having company, you know, companionship, you know, all these beautiful things that come with marriage. People can miss out on this. You know, I mean, I know, mashallah, you have amazing children. I've met some of your children and grandchildren. There's nothing, and I have children myself. There's nothing better than family. You know, in this life, this is the beauty of the dunya. You know, it's a test for us, but it's amazing. And I think this is something that many people kind of overlook and kind of shoot themselves in the foot with, almost. It's like they either culturally or they've logically convinced themselves that it's not for them, yet they're going to miss out on so much, you know. And
you're a good salesman.
I'm sorry. So no, I'm just saying it's really sad. I actually get sad, you know, seeing, you know, because when it comes to men, you know, like I'm always encouraging my brother here, Hossam, to get married. You know, he's 24, it's time to get married. But, you know, for a man, if he delays it, it's not such a big problem. But for women, I see so many issues, you know, and just it's very sad to see, because you don't know what you're missing until you have children or grandchildren. You know, this is really the fruit of life, you know. So I just wanted to give my sales pitch there, Chef. So buy the book.
Well, the key significance of the book is that it is important for people to know the rules, you know, because when people don't know the rules, some things might appear oppressive, unfair, unjust, etc., you know, when in fact they are just and fair and etc. So as much as one is able, one should learn, understand the rules if one is entering into polygamy. Just as if you're entering into a job or entering into any new situation, you try to get the manual on it, to get the information that will help you adjust yourself to the new situation.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I
Jazakallah
think we don't want to give them too much. They have to go and do the research themselves. But, just some points of advice and points of reflection, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. And, again, it's just another part of the Islamic system that makes sense. When you look at Islam as a whole, it's just amazing. It has solutions for everything, and this is one of the solutions for some things. But, just looking at the whole picture of Islam, mashallah, it's nice.
Yeah, I would encourage, those brothers who are marrying, for example, more than one wife, that they also marry outside of their culture, as opposed to the tendency to just marry within their own culture, whether it's the first wife either or the second and the third, to marry from other backgrounds. This was the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes.
Whether it's Maria al-Qibtiyya or Safiya, who was from Jewish background, and so on. So like this.
Divorcees as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one should not just restrict oneself to the one culture that they came from.
Yeah.
We need that openness. And it's something, beautiful. As you say, when I look at my kids also coming from different wives, different backgrounds, it is something, as you said, amazing and pleasing to see them and see what Allah has created. Alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah.
Mashallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. We ask Allah to accept it from you, and we ask Allah to make it easy for the Muslims, in their marriages and with their families. And Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء